Peace and welcome to the One Black Perch Publishing channel, a space where I share tips and takeaways from books on writing, editing, and publishing for writers looking to improve their craft for more effective storytelling. After I read an essay by the poet Carl Phillips on syntax and how we do it, book of essays for Black aspiring writers, I realized that I didn't have any books on syntax in my resource collection. So I grabbed Artful Sentences by Virginia Tuft, one of the few books that showed up on numerous lists. This one just happened to get some critical praise, but you always got to see for yourself to see how helpful something's going to be for you. Virginia Tuft was a professor emeritus at USC and author of another book on writing, Grammar and Style, published prior to this one. The book description ends with, "To write is to bring structure to ideas, information, and feelings. Here are many creative strategies in a book that is informed, affirming, lively, and of lasting value." So she's illustrating how writers deliberately structure sentences and paragraphs for specific effects on the reader. So I'm going to share a few methods that I happen to pluck out, hoping you'll find some use for them too. When you're writing it feels stale to you, or you want to change up your rhythm or learn to tie concepts together more cohesively or make a point more effectively, it's good to add more tools to your utility belt. But firstly, what is syntax? So syntax is the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences, whereas grammar is the rules by which you do it. There's 14 chapters in here. Each one goes over a syntactic concept. Some are more broadly known, and a few are a little less known, but I wouldn't necessarily call them advanced. They're just tools, and the more familiar you are with them, the more you'll be able to do in your writing. You might remember some of these from learning about the basics of grammar, hopefully early on in your education. So it might feel like a refresher to some degree if you haven't had to deal with grammar for a long time. But you remember prepositions. They literally tell you the position of a noun. They denote the relations of place. So in, on, at, behind, beside, through. He spends a chapter on how great writers have chosen their prepositions and the effectiveness of their choice. And one of the things I wanted to focus on was opening sentences. And there's a chapter here called Openers and Inversions that shows different ways to begin and the desired effect. It simplifies what options we should be looking for, making it easier to decide. She writes something about openers, saying that writers create sentence perspective when they're trying to decide on how to begin the next sentence on the page or screen. And the opening words of a sentence glance both backward and forward, and it establishes a relationship with what precedes it, and then bringing it back into view with new information. Now, normally a sentence might start with the subject, "I'm going to the store." According to her research, about 2/3 of English sentences begin with the subject, and about 1/4 of sentences start with the adverbial modifier or adverb phrase. "After I eat, I'm going to the store." So it's a phrase acting as, and oftentimes including, an adverb. But the majority of our everyday speech works this way. One of the things about this kind of opening is that it delays revealing the subject of a sentence, sort of deploying the use of suspense. And that subtle difference may seem like nothing in everyday conversation, but in a text or telling a story, knowing how you want the reader to experience whatever you've written really can help you decide the best times to use this or that kind of opening. Later in the book, she goes through a couple of concepts that we didn't necessarily learn the first time we encountered grammar or in our first composition course or first workshop. The first of those is parallelism. So parallelism is saying things in ways accomplished by repetition of words or structure in a planned symmetrical arrangement. Here's an example that she gives from a JFK speech. "All of this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime." So this excerpt was from his inaugural speech, and I'm not sure which policy he was talking about necessarily. It could have been talking about the direction of the country in general, but right away you hear the repeated "nor," and while the brief passage repeats "nor," it doesn't repeat like the entire phrase. So he starts with "will not," then replaces it saying "nor will," then "nor in," and lastly "nor even." And the phrasing doesn't even have to be the same or similar length either. You can obviously try things out in your own writing to see what feels right for you, what you happen to like, how you want to sound. There's a book on writing that's referenced here is Preface to Critical Reading by Richard Altick, and he says about parallelism, the matching of phrase against phrase, clause against clause, lends an unmistakable eloquence to prose. English prose all the way down to our time is tended toward balanced structure for the sake of contrast or antithesis or climate. And you see parallelism in a lot of places. A space where it sticks out most is in speeches, political speeches like JFK's commencement speeches. You'll see highlights highlights on YouTube of all these different commencement speeches like Denzel's, Jim Carrey's, Steve Jobs, Steve Carell, Chadwick Boseman, Obama. So motivational speeches do it too. But another common example of parallelism that everyone is familiar with are if-then statements, which if used in repetition produces cohesion. When it's done, it's called alternation. So she uses a passage from Theater of the Absurd by Martin Esslin to illustrate it. He wrote, "A good play must have a clearly constructed story. These have no story or plot to speak of. If a good play is judged by subtlety or characterization and motivation, then these are often without recognizable characters and present the audience with almost mechanical puppets." And he continues his way for a while, more of these statements in his critique of a play that he attended, which I apparently didn't like. But popular music, especially hip hop, is filled with alternating parallels. Listen to some of your favorite songs and pay attention to the patterns in the lyrics to see where they rhyme. You'll start to see the alternates. But you'll see it in the choruses, obviously, but in the verses too. Parallelism might seem like it's just a thoughtful repetition, but it can be used to set up a break from repetition too. So it's not necessarily the feature all the time. It's used as a tool to get to something else. In At Home with Mae West, Sadlowski wrote, according to the Almanac, Mae West was born in 1893. According to Mae West is 28 years old. The Almanac lies. The shorter sentence at the end breaks the pattern, but he also switched the subject from the Almanac in the first sentence to Mae West in the second sentence, immediately putting contrasting perspectives in front of the reader to consider. But the setup is there because of the syntax. So if the sentence, the Almanac lies, was the first sentence, it would take all the surprise or a subtle turn out of the passage, leaving you wait for proof or supporting statements like a more straightforward general explanation. One of the books that she suggested for a deeper understanding of some of the concepts that she covers is Structural Essentials of English by Harold Whitehall. And from his book, she borrows his 5 categories of prepositions, which are location, direction, association, agency, and time. Those can be useful as you work to keep each word and phrase purposeful and leading you somewhere instead of arbitrary and random choices. This is from a portrait of the artist as a young man. He says that he watched their flight, bird after bird, dark flash, swerve, flash again, a dart aside, curve, flutter of wings. So you have an abrupt rhythm, quick pace, short phrase, and each phrase you can visualize in a sequence. So flash, swerve, flash, dart, something, flutter. He made sure to describe the flight and not the birds, and turned his syntax into a simulation. This is an example of syntactic symbolism, which is another one of the concepts that she covered in the book. With this, the syntax has more of an investment. The words and phrases almost act out what the passage is communicating, or how she puts it, a skilled writer may use the same structure in a way that mimics the particular actions the sentence describes. But the point is to be thoughtful about word choices, the sound of words to the reader's ear, the structure of phrases and sentences and passages, the sequence, or scene to scene if you write fiction. But there's a lot of books to inspire and motivate writers, lending some courage to folks that are shy about sharing their work. Those are helpful too, like Steve Pressfield's War of Art, or Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones. But reading on the craft of writing and the different forms of editing expose you to different ways of viewing your writing, which is important because revision is the bulk of the writing process. So that's where you can also experiment with these different syntactic concepts or other elements that you want to incorporate. So with today, with AI tools now in the mix like ChatGPT and other LLMs, large language models, the question of how writers will incorporate the technology into their writing process is a relevant one. Grade school, high school, and college students have already been using the tech to aid with school papers and other things. Some call cheating and making the news, prompting the creation of AI text detection technology. So it might be a natural progression that future writers will see an incorporation of AI into their writing process. It might be commonplace in the future. But I've yet to incorporate it regularly into my own writing process, though I do use it to create outlines sometimes. In the meantime, we're going to build a little archive of printed books for ambitious, inspiring writers who have a penchant for getting into the weeds of language to make their stories that much better. Maybe the last archive of its time. Maybe that was a little dramatic. But anyway, if you found this video helpful, hit all the buttons, get notified when new videos are posted, and share with your writer friends.